Okay. Alrighty. So, welcome. Hello again, Tomaki. Thank you for coming again. Hello, Frozen. Thank you for coming. As I mentioned in the update post that I put on Reddit, if there's not too much participation this time around, I'm just gonna kind of end it early. Um, just because like the conversation was fairly long, but not necessarily like uh, how do I put this? Because my brain stopped working. This has happened last time. No, like a productive is a good way to describe the previous conversation. It was very productive. Yeah. I got honestly had a lot more people join the conversation than I expected. Had a lot more. Had great conversation and great points brought up by everyone. So I felt like it was very good. It was a well done conversation. So this is kind of for people who didn't show up, who want to see see if there's anything else to kind of discuss. Um, Maybe talk about how we can do this again, or like what another topic would be interested for people to talk about. Just because, let me make sure that just because when you get a lot of good information, you can't really like get more unless you get more people, and if people think this may have been a problem on my end, but if people think that the conversation was well done and they don't need to participate in the second one, they're just not going to show up. At the same time, a lot of people are not going to show up the second time, or like the second day of something like this, simply because they may not have even wanted to show up for the first one. So, yeah. Long story short, I appreciate you guys being here, um, and yeah. I honestly don't blame you for having not having to watch it. I realized that the first 14 minutes was basically me and Tomaki having this exact kind of conversation where it's me talking and responding to people in chat, but you can't hear it. You can't hear people typing. So it's just like 14 minutes of me kind of like stumbling around for a bit until people showed up. Um, so I very much appreciate Tomaki joining in to kind of add another voice. But I mean, like, I don't really think, honestly, we really talked about like what you posted, so to speak. Um, we didn't really talk about like time it takes to clear the content, which I actually think was kind of a big factor with it. Oh, well then, um, if you would like to join the stage and speak your mind, please do. Welcome, man.
Hello, hello.
Hey, Tamaki. Yeah.
All right, so after actually read some of the comments and like under the post, I'm actually seeing a lot of people complaining about how Lago is a bit too, like, say, punishing, right? So I would like to pick something pretty interesting about how the game kind of like teaches us how to play the game in a way. So you know how, like, how in the past trades where like we always have this kind of like patterns when it comes to like developing our strategies for clearing the raids.
Mm-hmm.
Like Mashi knows something about this is that it's always been the same thing, right? The first time you meet the boss, right? You basically just kind of like weigh out what the boss with the mechanic. You do the mechanic, and then the boss, and then after doing the mechanic, we burst, right? Like almost every raid, at least the one I've been in and have fight in, and I've seen like always seen this kind of like same pattern. It's always been like this. Like, you kind of just like trying to doing some cheap damage to the boss, just kind of waiting for mechanic, do the mechanic and then burst. And so like this kind of like this kind of like things that the game trying to teach us is kind of ingrained this kind of mindset for us to be like kind of like be impatient. And so what I found a lot of people find Logos to be frustrating is that like people are just being impatient because they have been kind of like taught to be impatient because of the raid mechanics before Lago. Because Lago fight is extremely different from the other fights we have fought so far. Like he does not have a proper burst phase, and so like it's all on just a long sustained fight. And so like I find like people being frustrated at Logo is because like people are just not really used to what they are being used to do, right? Because Logo is just very a different thing that they actually get tackling.
Hmm. It is kind of funny that like I think every single first boss that we've ever dealt with all raids has always just been just brute force it. Like Gatekeeper, brute force it. We didn't like we knew because of Katie enough that you're supposed to kill the boss in a certain like order, but we still just brute forced it. We didn't care about his actual mechanics. Gatekeeper die just in the right order. Osmods the uh, each one of the first area bosses were really just like their mechanics weren't anything too oppressive to the character, so it was just run in and burst, run in and just brute force the boss. It wasn't really until we got to I guess like Kazan where that you couldn't just run in and burst. You have to like actually pay attention to the mechanics. And I think you're right. Like, if people have just become impatient, and that should have been a good point to really kind of recognize that um, at least like Kazan we should really like kind of hold up as like a perfect example, one of the best fights designed in the game. Like I don't think there is a fight as great as Kazan in the 100 cap. I think it's just Kazan's fight is just perfect. And I don't think we've gotten a similar one since something as good. Um, yeah, he is an actual gatekeeper. But like the way his fight like forces you to do the mechanics so that he like screwing up will cost like I mean to put it in another way, his failure mechanic is the same thing as Largo's. If you fail it, he heals to full health, and you have a time limit when you're in Kazan. So if you fail, maybe once or twice, you're going to get kicked out, and it's going to reset the whole thing. And it's actually going to it's a pretty significant penalty for failing. So you need to pay attention to the mechanics. And Largo is the same thing. You need to pay attention to the mechanics, or in his case, you die.
Yeah, that's something that I've been noticing a lot too. Like Kazan is, he was actually the actual gatekeeper for a very same reason as how Lago is being like notably harder, right, comparing to how Kazan is like much harder fight compared to the rest of the raid, because he's just kind of different than others. Is that he's not something that you want to like just blow him up. Like it's just not that, it's actually just not that simple. And so like because of how like I find people being frustrated about Largo is that like he is just different than what we used to, and so like people find him to be frustrating. Is what they it's actually what I'm like kind of realizing.
Yeah, I'm kind of realizing that the Largo and Kazan fights are actually pretty similar in terms of what they do for the well, one's a raid and one's small group or solo content, but they are kind of like the same thing. They are essentially gatekeeping you from going higher and doing more difficult content, so to speak. I mean, I wouldn't consider doing Exceed if you can't do Largo C4, with the consideration that Exceed punishes you far more severely than for failing mechanics than Largo does. But you're still conditioned to do the mechanics so you don't fail, or so you can get through it. And Kazan did the same thing. You have to do his mechanic. It's actually funny we didn't like make this connection or bring it up in the first discussion. But Kazan was really like a very good parallel to the Largo fight.
I'm right there. I actually like really like Kazan fight and Osmo. I think like I mean, though I do actually do really much enjoy the actual Osmo fight, but I think like Kazan is like very close second for that. And I think for that reason is that there's something that's pretty interesting like you know about like Lago fight and Kazan is that instead of like how the fight kind of teaches you to be like be quick and in a way being impatient. Um, Kazan and Lago teaches you the opposite, which is like to be patient about it, right? It's not something. It's not something that you have to rush. It's not something that you have to get done quickly. Like it's something you have to like take your time with it and just really like try to learn. Like the main thing about the fight is just that they want you to be like patient. And well, I mean like considering how like the other fights have taught us so far is that it's be very opposite. And so like, I think like people are just being frustrated about that is because it because it trying to bring something that is very much opposite of what they're used to.
Yeah, that is a very good point that Frozen makes. Um, uh, to kind of clarify, and tomorrow is Memorial Day. It is a holiday in the United States, so that means people fire off fireworks. Doesn't matter what
Yes.
holiday is, fireworks happen. Especially in the South, where we have a bunch of stores that just say, "Here, buy a massive amount of fireworks that are all illegal to buy unless it's July 4th." Anyways, Frozen makes an excellent point. Like, optional super boss is a required raid boss. Like, if you, it's kind of fun if you look at the normal C3 Largo fight, or really like the normal just saying normal Largo fight. He's just a big old beefy dude who runs into walls and cackles uh, about being strong and stuff. Um, it's not really much of a like a personally. I really don't think it's a well designed fight. It just seems like this is the end, and this is what you just have to deal with something that's just like running around all the time, and causing the whole stage to blow up. Versus C4 Largo, which is a well crafted, well designed, difficult, challenging fight that gets easier the more you kind of like pay attention to what you're doing. Similar to how Kazan works, like is the better coordination you have with your raid group to be able to kill Lion? Is it Lionel?
Uh, Leonid, I think it's his name. Yeah,
Leo
yeah,
something.
Leonid. I think. Let me touch about the name.
There it is, Leonid. So it's like the the coordination you have to kill Leonid in time with the timing both the entrance of your Kazan kill party, and like how it like lines up with everything in cooldowns and all this stuff just to make it like the perfect timing and everything is really important coordination that you have to do with your group that you don't have to do for Largo, but you still have to have that kind of mindset when you're doing Largo. You want to be able to coordinate things and plan things properly when you're doing the fight. So welcome, Rizan.
Another thing I'm actually like noticing too is that like about the Kazan fight stuff is that like unlike how like most of the fights where like you kind of expect for the boss to to do a mechanic at a certain amount of time and then and you have like a set have like a expected amount of time but like hey we have this amount of time and so we can expect for the boss to do a mechanic at less amount of time, right? But Kazan isn't quite like that. It's because like it's maybe because of the internet because like you don't really like expect well yeah you can't really expect a fixed amount of time for you to be able to like have a hold with there and do the burst. And so like in a way like Kazan Fight itself despite it being like kind of having say somewhat same format as the other bosses like just that one difference in in the very very timing on the bus timing, it's just also like kind of teaches you a similar thing about how you want to like weigh out and hold off, like trying to again be patient, right? You wait for the bus, you wait for the other party to clear it for you to be able to bus cause up.
It kind of like highlights a couple of class balance problems also, because there's certain classes where they have fire and forget skills or install skills that while you're managing these mechanics and being patient, you can still use your skills and deal a little bit of damage while you're waiting for the proper time to just unleash your full kit. Some classes have access to so many more of these skills than others, and it can affect how easy or how difficult the content is. Like, you play male mech, his entire kit is instant stalls that you can just press a button while you're moving around. So if you have good coordination, you can just continuously attack the boss while also doing all the mechanics. Or if you have someone like, say, Vanguard, or like the same thing, or Summoner, where you literally don't even have to worry about touching the boss. Your summons, everything is installed. Yeah, but like, let's say you're a Vanguard, you don't necessarily have any install skills. If I remember his character at all, I don't think he has any install skills, and a lot of his skills actually have fairly long casting animations. So he's a character you have to be far more careful of how you're maneuvering on the boss. And when you get your damage, like your ability to do damage, you have a very short window. But I that's yes.
You're not wrong.
That's true. I don't. Yeah, it's weird. Like, there's not actually too many characters that don't have any install skills in their kit. Vanguard is one of them. I can't really think of another. Off the top of my head, because a lot of characters that have skills that either have some kind of like damage over time effect, or they can be popped out. SM has I can't remember the name of the skill.
Unleash.
Yes,
Unleash.
I was about to say Gloria because that's what she says, but Unleash is one. Kind of what I mean by these skills are things like both Crescent and Flash will fire off something super quick, and you're not stuck in the animation. And because of her canceling mechanic, you can use the skill and immediately go to something else and then be able to get out. This is saying something like Vanguard, where if they use Blade Storm, I think they still use that. You're stuck in that entire animation until it ends, or you cancel it early. So unlike other classes, they have to go through the full animation to get their damage, while SM can just use Flash and she can move right away. Yeah, it's something like, I don't remember ever calling them installs when I remember these skills, because I always call them fire and forget, and I forget. I don't even remember where I've heard of that term to just have it be common parlance for me, but like, I use fire and forget. I think some people have used installs. I think it's because installs comes from either League of Legends or StarCraft, where it's skills that you put something down. It's like a turret. So you just put the turret down, and turret does its thing. You've installed the turret. So I think that might be where it comes from. But to kind of get back to the point, like, there is a pretty big difference between the two. Like, sorry, brain stopped working. But there's a pretty big difference between having install skills and not having them when there's a fight that kind of conditions you to be patient, as Tomaki is saying. So like, Largo's is again just very well designed in kind of like forcing players to play the way that he wants you to fight, rather than the way that we want to fight. But I wanted to, before Frozen to like heads out, I wanted to bring up the point that they made. We talked a little bit about this before in the previous one, but not too long. Is one of the common problems that people were talking about is the fact that if you go into C4 Largo, if you have to leave for any reason, like let's say you have a scheduled raid or you have group content you do with friends that you have a scheduled time for, you can't just pause and leave. You have to end your attempt. And with there being a limited number of attempts per week, that can kind of like put a lot of pressure on someone to feel like they have to clear the content right then and there, and that becomes a frustration to when you're doing it, because you have to clear it. Otherwise, you might not have time later on to actually clear the content. And I think that's a very good point to bring up, that there should be something to kind of like let us pause our attempt, because I mean, when I was doing this, I didn't the first week that we had C4 the Dusky Island, I had maybe one actual day in the entire week to dedicate time to attempting it, and that was a night that I also had raids. So, I felt like if I had any time to try, it was just not enough to actually get the kind of experience I needed to feel like I could do the fight.
Yeah, I actually don't really get the point of why they just decide to make like a limited number of entries for some reason, and it's just really like annoying. Like as you said before, that like people like schedule can be different, and so like oftentimes you have to stop the fight to do to actually do the set things, right? And so like it's just like really annoying when like you will have to do the fight over again in order to continue progging. And so like I do also find it be very annoying too, especially when like I just want to take a break and I just want to do something else. But well, I mean like if I leave now, then when I come back, we have to do fight 1 and 2 again, and it's just like um that's just not. I think like I just don't really get why they just have that like limited number of entries. It's just kind of weird, especially like it doesn't really do anything other than just like being like a big hindrance.
Some people, I would assume like aspect of it would be, um, one aspect of would be cells. Obviously, they don't want people to have an infinite amount of time to, or an infinite amount of opportunities to sell. But I don't really consider that too big of an issue, because cells have a different kind of goal. So I guess like you want to be able to clear the content in an appropriate amount, or like an acceptable amount of time, and with little difficulty, so that people can trust you to be reliable for selling. Um, but I think that one of the more elegant and simple solutions to this is just change it to there is a weekly reward count, and if once you obtain that weekly reward, it ends the amount of times it ends your entries. So your entry limit is no longer tied to a arbitrary number. It's instead tied to you actually clearing the content. Again, I think this would tie into some issues with cells, but yeah, it would. I think there is some way for them to do it where that you don't feel as much pressure to clear it with just the limited amount of entries that you have.
I mean, like technically, we already have that though. Like we do have the reward systems only, where like if you already got the reward from like say the fight 1 and 2 or Lago, but for some reason you actually abandon on the third one, if you actually fight them again, you don't get the reward again. And so like and if you already got all rewards already, then you can enter again anyway. And so like that's why I just kind of like boggles at the idea of like we already have a kind of system for these, so why you still have like a limited number of entries? It's already like kind of solve the problems of selling. So like I just don't really get the idea of like having a limited number of entries.
Yeah, this is one aspect of the of the Legion dungeon content that I've always felt a little bit kind of weird about.
Oh, that
They
would be huge.
I really think they should bring back practice mode. We did talk about Dr. Oracle in the previous conversation, and Dr. Oracle is one of the best things they ever introduced because it was basically practice mode. I really don't get why they got rid of it. I can't even remember when we had up to what content we had access to practice mode, but all I remember is that it was people liked it. You could run into a dungeon, practice your combos, practice your rotation, your like understand how your character works before actually attempting the content that was challenging at the time. That was the reason you were practicing for. So like, I think like a practice mode for Exceed would be nice. Even though the practice mode for Exceed is really just the normal White Cloud Valley. Yes, yeah. If you want to speak, just you just have to click that. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm not quite used to these community events, but hey.
Hey, Frozen.
Oh.
Alright, I've been typing this whole time like a fool. Alright.
That's fine.
Let's see, I don't know how much longer before my Baldur's Gate 3 party requests my presence, but let's see. I guess I'm just not 100% sure what I should cover in the time I have left.
Anything?
I'm making that sound super dramatic.
It's anything, like whatever we talked about in the previous conversation can still be brought up again. There's different people here and different opinions that can be brought up. I mean, just okay. Saying, like we came up with different things even that we never mentioned in the previous one already.
All right, I guess I'll just jump into a few of the big things I've been thinking about recently about Largo. So one of the things is I have quite a few people in my guild who are just super strong and they've been veterans of the game for forever, and they really like Largo. It's really shaking things up. At first I could hear them practicing and being frustrated. Obviously it's just it was quite tough, but now that most of them have cleared and they say, oh, this is great, this is actually really fantastic content, and I can hear it in them. They've some of them have been a little less into DFO than they were years prior. Just been at this game for a long time, but Largo has actually just really reinvigorated them. Just they just really enjoyed it, and now that we're back to more of a slower content coming out, they aren't as much of a fan of Exceed. I haven't tried Exceed myself due to the way they speak about it, but just in general, more stuff Largo I think is really quite good for the game. Just from the bubble that I've been in of people, really enjoyable content. And it's just a really good challenge for those who've been playing this game for so long. That just most content is just steamroll for them. And so you need something on Largo's difficulty to really get them to stop and slow down. Personally, I've been one trying most content up till now. To be honest, I've been even first day selling some stuff. It's just not been that much of a problem. But Largo actually stonewalled me, and part of that was because of the scheduling and the retrying being difficult, as I said, but just also because it's a whole lot of stuff where you need to actually learn it, because you can't just see it and react to it. There's so many patterns in DFO where it's just okay, I'm gonna put down 1 million red circles, but then I don't need to know what's going on. I see red circles, okay, don't stand in any of them. But Largo, you need to know what's happening before it happens if you want to dodge it as a class without crazy movement speed. It might be obvious from my profile, but I'm a glacial master, so male mage based movement speed not the best. Teleport is good, but you need to know where you're going before you do it, or else the delay will kill you. And I've gotten a lot better at teleporting on my male mages since Largo dropped. I've had actually need to be very mindful of where I'm landing to make sure I'm actually dodging into safety instead of just dodging somewhere and then moving. I don't have time for that on Largo. So yeah, like there's a lot of great stuff about it. One other thing I hope I'm not like over speaking. If you guys want to say anything, feel free to interrupt me. But just like about like installs and like some other things, I think like Largo represents like a kind of evolving game design from DFO that we've been seeing for a while. Like the first time we got like raid level content or just like even just like an ancient dungeon kind of stuff, there were a lot of mechanics that kind of just like stopped you in your tracks and just like do this gimmick, and then like once you succeed on the gimmick, then I turn into a sandbag and you kill me. And like that was just really common. But I also enjoyed the more dynamic fights where it's just like I'm running around, I'm doing stuff. If you don't respect my rules, you'll die. But if you respect my rules, you can still hit me while stuff is happening. And that wasn't that common, but it started growing more and more common. Like I think I first started like really noticing it for like oh gosh, what was that content? Is that guy trying to resurrect Sirocco before Sirocco raid, where just like he's always vulnerable, he's always there, but and you can keep hitting him, but like just attacks are happening. You have to move around and like consider if you have enough time to get moves out like as they're happening.
Oculus.
Yeah, I think it's Oculus. Like
Oculus, yeah.
And if you're good at the game, like you can just basically do full like sandbag rotations as you're dodging attacks, and I find that to be like probably the DFO at its best, in my opinion. Like there's room for puzzle gimmicks and things like that, but I find like actually being able to just do what the class is meant to do while like dynamically having to adjust position, while having to like decide like, oh, do I actually have time to like get that out, or do I like kind of lose DPS like because I will die if I try it, and like now that skill's like been off cooldown for 10 seconds but I haven't had a chance to land it. That does of course naturally lead to like you said, like install classes having a huge advantage. They just like boop, the skill's out and now they can just run around, dodge freely, and like a lot of the more channel-y classes like are kind of have a much tougher time of it. And there's always going to be like difficulty balancing that, like because how much do you compensate like the fact that you need to channel something? It's a difficult question. But I think just like even for those classes, like just like the amount of dynamic like gameplay that comes of it is still like a lot more fun than just what we've had in the past with just like gimmick into sandbag bosses.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the first bosses that a lot of people can like recognize that on was Flu in Ghost Train, because there was a period of time like even if you once you damage him enough, he went into that phase where the pillars popped up and you have to I have no idea how the actual mechanic is supposed to go, but he would basically show that the entire ground was about to be hit by an AoE and you had to jump, but there's also these pillars that are next to him that you had to attack. So if you didn't do this, I think he would just then shoot like a ghost form of him across the stage and it could kill you. So that was something you couldn't just be like just continuously wail on the boss. It was actually forced you to kind of like stop and do the mechanic, as you said. And as both you mentioned and Anne mentioned, the fight has kind of made people realize more about their class, like you knowing more about like the value of your teleports and like and some of your other skills. Like I'm assuming you would use Pinpoint Rush. It's one of your top damaging skills, but you may save it for a time where you need the iframe instead of actually using it on cooldown. So that's one of the things that like kind of like maybe this is still my most damaging skill, but maybe I shouldn't be just like trying to push all my points into it if I'm mainly going to be using it as kind of to save my skin. So it's kind of an interesting, and like you also learn how long the iframes last. Like for me, I'm actually very glad they added iframes to Dark Impulse, my level 80 skill on Impaler, and doing the fight I learned where the iframes were when you landed and how long they lasted, and the fact that I could use them to basically cheese the pizza mechanic if I timed it right. Like I would be able to like use it to then just like immediately move actually through a couple of the cuts and avoid them. But I would never have like really focus on that if the fight didn't kind of force me to figure out like what would be considered safe.
Yeah, like I think that does a great job of like emphasizing like what the details of the class, what's special about my class. Like for me, like obviously I have my 45 skill that like lasts forever and just iframes the whole time, but it's just like it's just one of the tools that helped out, but it wasn't like the end all be all. And I heard a little bit from like the video, just like how some classes have like basically forever iframes, and it's kind of inevitable. But I still think like what we got like just really entertained me. Just I really had to figure out like what it was with my kit, like make decisions. Just like okay, like I can get out all my other skills instead of like doing pinpoint rush first, and then like pinpoint rush the moment like a pizza slice happens, and it's just like oh, that was like the optimal way to do that. That felt really good.
Mm-hmm. I'm hoping that like the next level of content isn't as what's the right word? No. I want to say brutal, but I don't really think brutal is the right word for it. It's like I guess as punishing. Like we did discuss in the previous conversation that like maybe if Largo, instead of there was instant death mechanics, it would heal him a lot more. That would make the fight less punishing. Which I think that the consensus on that was like it was all over. Like there was no real consensus on that. Some people liked the idea. Some people didn't really like the idea. Bosses healing after you've done a ton of work, and then having a mechanic that punishes you for the fight lasting too long, like black cuts, is not okay. Like those two things mixed together is not okay. But those two things separate may be okay. Or black cuts should just be gone in general.
I'll say that like I really like what the black cuts were trying to accomplish, because like now that you're familiar with these gimmicks, like it adds like one more layer of like complication. Like I think I talked about this. I see it right in front of me. The comment, just like how dynamic the fight is. Like there's so many fights where like once you like learn it, like it's like riding a bike. You just aren't gonna have that much trouble with it. Like but I feel like something like the black cuts is just like always going to be like a threat, and like going to keep demanding new things of you. Like you know how to dodge the attack, but there's a black cut here. Like how do you solve this problem? And you have like 2 seconds to make a judgment. I find that idea incredibly fascinating, but I also am not the hugest fan of how like that happens like 10 minutes into the fight for me, after like a bunch of resetting and stuff, and because my damage wasn't very high when I was trying it. But just like that part was admittedly like a lot less amusing, because it's like okay, now practicing that was actually like a real hassle. Like once I got to that point, like now I had to deal with this on top of that, and I'm already like stressed out and tired from how long I've been like fighting that. So there's definitely like things that could have gone better, but I will say like it's kind of unfortunate, but one-shotting has become like kind of necessary for a lot of like these end game fights. It's something you see in a lot of games where just like the escalation of difficulty. I think the real problem is that we can heal back way too quickly. Like if we don't get one shot, we will just heal back. Like that's just how it is. And if we wanted to change that, it would like need to like redesign like how we look at health. Like you'd need to like when you get chunked by 70%, it shouldn't be something you can fix in like 2 seconds. But with what we have, like we basically need to be one shot, or else like I would have steamrolled this fight. If I had been allowed 1 token throughout this fight, I would have steamrolled this in like the first week.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what HOD was doing, because in HOD, if you get hit by attacks, I'm not sure if it's every single fight. I can't really remember how this mechanic works properly.
It's
for the last one, which transcends stuff fight. It's only for that one. And you get like
okay.
Yeah, it's actually only for trans, so it's like what 5 times at max, and that is a lot of damage. And if you actually like get hits, you lose like drop like that damage boost drops down to like I think like times 3 or something like that or something. I don't know, but it is actually like huge damage loss.
Oh no no! Oh
If you
sorry,
get-
Oh,
I'm
you mean
sorry.
for HP
I wasn't
mag-
referring to the damage mechanic in HOD. I was referring to in HOD where part of your health becomes gray and you can't heal above it
Oh,
unless
that
you
one, yeah.
use either uh, what's it? Unless you use
Cleanse.
either a toy or a healing item.
Yeah, it's a cleanse. Cleanse.
Cleanse, yeah.
It is. It is a new kind of debuff that it basically like limits your max HP and MP.
I forget what they call it in other games.
In game they are called distortion.
Yeah.
But
okay.
the effects
But
on
it's just a max
store-
HP reduction.
Yeah.
But
It's like a health
So-
block.
it is there, but like I'm not sure how I feel about that also being the answer. Like I guess it really comes down to like how many mistakes can the player make, or like how many in a row does it take to like kick him out, and like that needs a lot of more like careful consideration, because this is a really long fight, and just like getting one shot near the end, like it's not even by a black line. Like there were a number of times where I was on phase 2 and just like because his damage increases over time, like the ground shockwave of like the 3 circle gimmick would be enough to one shot me, and that was discouraging, to be honest.
Oh, I finally managed to get a solo clear on my Necromancer 1 or 2 days ago, and I had a death at 10%, a death at 5%, and a death at 1%. So yeah, I really would have liked to have killed the boss if he did kill me one blow to a mechanic I barely even made a mistake with. So like each time it was during the 4th berserk mechanic.
Yep.
Yeah,
But-
suddenly.
There we go. Each time it was there. Each time it was because one of those little yellow lines just I just thought it was not it was spaced correctly, but Thief is too tall, and her head gets clipped, and then that's all it needs to happen to ruin the whole thing. And I'm like, that was 5 minutes of extremely stressful gameplay, having to need to do it all over again. So
I did feel that too. Like,
I think
Melmech and his long, lanky, entire everything.
my goodness, like I see on my clear, like my head just like barely just like touching the line and still get hit anyway. Right? It's just so bad.
I think it also hurts like kind of class identity. Like you think of certain classes being tanky or like bulky, and it's like nah, doesn't matter.
No,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's kind of also kind of like a sad point too. Yeah.
And also any sort of like defensive considerations. Like there's customs that like offer damage reduction, but like nah.
I do find it funny that they set a limit to the amount of damage reduction you can have, and it's 75%. But even if you're at max defense, which a lot of people are able to get now, it doesn't matter. The damage they deal is like so much that 75% damage reduction would still reduce it to all of your health. I don't really like it's always been kind of a weird like thing that there's certain stats that they provide to players to kind of either stack or have access to that don't really mean anything, because the content in the game is meant to be able to kill you, and you're not meant to be able to survive certain things. So like we have the satyr builds where satyrs are literally able to just eat every single hit that they take. I don't know if people are still running it, but like it was the magic stone that gave you that would turn all damage dealt to you into a specific element type, and then you would just max out your elemental resistance in that spot, and then whenever you take damage from that effect, you get healed. So you would just take literally no damage, because the damage would be reduced, and then you'd have your actual damage reduction effect, and then all these other things, and you're just like, what damage has even come like hit me? Like, I'll take the hard Bakal phase transition damage. I'll just sit in the flames and not die because it can't kill me, versus every other character where they just immediately die. So it's always felt kind of weird, like giving these options when it's not necessarily like usable options.
I think it kind of ties to how how they actually want to design a lava fight. Is that like they want Lalo to be like kind of similar to how like how difficult like how like other MMOs has been doing with the heart rates, where the boss just just gonna smite you, basically just gonna smite you no matter what.
Hey,
And so like yeah,
sorry,
so like it's like
sorry to interrupt, but just like I do have to head out. But yeah, thank you for having me. Thanks for letting me get out my thoughts.
Thanks for coming.
yeah, thank you.
Yep. All right.
See ya.
Have a good one. All right, so yeah, so it's just how like similar to how like it's basically like trying to follow the trends with Lago. Is that like they want Follow Fight to be like as punishing as possible, even for like classes that are meant to be a big tank. So like yeah, I mean like it's kind of like they just trying to go for that kind of trend, and I do find that kind of bullshit that we have to drop a lot of things just to follow that trend.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite things about wiping in WoW is that when the tanks would die, it would just be like a domino effect as the boss would just turn to whoever was closest to him and smack him. And you just see like the melee just like put up a damage reduction effect, like, oh, I can take a hit, and they take one hit and they survive, and they're super surprised and they take a second hit and immediately die. So it's like it's like it doesn't matter if the boss is 10% health. There's not a single person here who can hold the boss long enough for everyone to deal enough damage before he just like walks over and flicks you in the head and you die. It is a bit interesting to consider that DFO is trying to follow other game trends, because not all of them, like things that DFO does, isn't necessarily like what they do on their own isn't necessarily the greatest, but other games also are not doing things great either, and you end up getting kind of this like flow of like maybe there's one or two great ideas and then four or five really bad ideas. Excuse me. So for example, like what we've seen with Moo Raid, like the way that the Moo Raid, the final fight, from my understanding, the way that it works is super cool. It was like the kind of like the rotation between each of the groups, but then you get the actual Moo fight where there's just stuff all over the screen, and like you can't even see the ground to know where you're supposed to properly stand. Or like when the enclosing circles are happening, like you can't really like plan things too well, and it's just like it will incur panic in people, and they're gonna mess up. They're gonna mess up and die, just because it's these mechanics that are coming out suddenly, quickly, and with a lot of punishment for failure.
Yeah, it's just it just basically throws you, it just throws everything at you and expect you to just like learn these things like instantly, which is not something like humanly is not even humanly possible, but like it's just not fair in a way.
Yeah, and the other side of it is that like we always call Kitty F the guinea pig server, because they get all the stuff beforehand and they get it balanced, and we get the balanced version. And like what we can see now is that a lot of people aren't doing Moo Raid because the rewards are just not considerably as valuable as just running Azrahan hard. And so what does that say about the content? Is that part of the reason why we have such a huge delay in actually getting both Azrahan and the raid? Or even the new, like, is it related to why we're getting the new archers in several months rather than like it as like a summer event? Like there's a lot of questions that like, does the difficulty of content and how it has been presented to the audience and how the audience reacts to it affect how like we actually get content given to us?
Yeah, so from all of us, like started, we have talked about how like how like different fights are just kind of like fun. I think like a lot of these fights where like they may seem like kind of like annoying at first, becomes fun later. Like I think like a great part about how these fights kind of ties to is that they make you learn, right? all of those kind of like small techniques, small little technique you can do in the fight, where basically like only you can really like learn. Well, only you can only see it once you experience it. Like it, the part of what makes all these fights are fun is that the learning process, right? Where they makes you actually like learn and also discover on on these all these little things that we just tackling. So like part of what makes Logo really fun is that yeah he may just not kill you straight up, but what he's trying to do is just trying to make you learn make you learn on how to dodge his attacks. Right, you can have
Mm-hmm.
me techniques to actually tackling a certain attacks. Like you can like say just run out of it. Maybe like maybe like the most obvious one, but you can also just try to say item it. And so like it depends on. And so I feel like what's kind of brilliant about like Log of Fight is that he gives you a lot of time. And so with this like you have an hour to actually beat him, and so you can actually take your time with it, and like no it's just not really, it's just not as fun when you're forced to like rush some they rush a learning process,
Yeah.
because like because like people are learning things at their own pace, and and Log will just give you a lot of time, and so like you can't just take your time with it. You can yeah you can try to be a wuss and just not attacking him at all, but but with the patience, you can just slowly just chip him down and beat him. And I think that what makes him great is that you can just do things at your own pace, unlike most of the fights.
Yeah. That is a valuable point. Yeah. I do like the fact that it's not like there is pressure with the black lines, but I mean, if you're just trying to learn the fight and you're trying to like properly do each one of the mechanics and knowing how each one works, you have plenty of time to be able to do that. And I do like that's how the fight is set up. That kind of gives you that time. Um, so again, like I consider Largo one of the best designed fights that they've had recently. And it's kind of a shame that like we get this great difficult content and then we get another difficult content that is not so great and Exceed. Not to bring up the same topic that we talked about last time, um, but Exceed like where Largo succeeded, Exceed failed.
Yeah, it is a timer, which is you you cannot rush a learning process. Like again, I've talked about this before that like people learn things at different paces, and oftentimes you can't reforce it. Forcing something is will not end well, I don't think. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it will not end well, I think.
Well, unless you or Anne or Riazan have anything else to mention, I don't really have anything extra to contribute this go around.
I mean, also, not honestly, I actually don't have much of an idea anymore. I mean, other than like the point I brought up initially, I think that part was actually like a very interesting to think about. But how like the game has been like teaching us, and so like I want people to just like be aware of on how they have been doing things, and maybe like say maybe just look at a different perspective, right? I think like people find Logo to be frustrating. I think it's mostly because people are just too conditioned to basically being too conditioned to a more to a different like to a different thing, and so like Logo is just a something that is just completely different from what they used to. And so, like, I want the people who find that logo to be like, they say, punishing or frustrating. I would like to implore you guys to try to find a different way of looking at the fight. Try not to like apply the same formula that we're used to. Like we like you wear out mechanic, you do mechanic and the burst. I actually gonna make that term as called as like wait, make then bust. So yeah, so maybe try to just look at it differently, I guess. Like try maybe instead of like try to rush them down, maybe like just be patient and then just hold out a bit, right? Because eventually you will beat them. Like you are not being rushed by timer. You have an hour to beat them, so just take your time with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very, very good point. Can't say anything else. It's very well executed, well said point. With that, I think I will go ahead and end it. Um, uh, it's almost an hour. Had a really good conversation just with the few of us here. Um, Once again, thank you very much, Tomaki, for showing up and participating. Thank you, Anne and Raison, for showing up and participating. And even though he's gone, but thank you, Frozenstep, for participating. I really appreciate it. Um, so, uh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Thanks for making this happen, right? Blowing up this like events. Like it can be kind of difficult, especially when not a lot of people kind of show up. But I do appreciate the effort.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, like difficulty in getting people to talk in any kind of situation is one of the challenges of interviewing, and this is something I have to overcome since this is a career, like a career goal for me is to do this kind of stuff. But you do have to kind of like know what is something that people actually want to talk about, and if it's something they're interested in, they can talk for hours. Like we had talked for 2.5 hours last week. We talked for almost an hour this week. If you can give them a topic that's interesting to them and something that they want to talk about, they'll talk your ear off. So it's the challenge is identifying what is a good topic to bring up and talk about. So I'd love to do this again. I wanted to talk about the first time I tried to do this. I want to talk about the game economy, but I think that's a little bit too much of a contentious topic. And even now, I don't really know if it's a good topic to bring up again, just because of how the economy seems to be rolling. But if I decide to do another kind of community conversation, it will probably be in a few months. Maybe it'll be Azerhan, maybe it'll be about Move Raid or whatever they show in the future. So we'll see for then. But for anyone who stuck around to this point, once again, thank you. And if you're interested in being interviewed by me anytime in the future about your time at TFO, just send me a message and we'll set it up. And yeah. And stop the recording.